Hi, friend, and welcome back to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe. Today, we're continuing our discussion of Jessica Jones Season 3, so let's roll right back into Episode 2 and roll that credit. It looks like Episode 2 is going to be Trisha's story, taking us back to the moment that she ends right at the end of Season 2, picking up right where she catches the phone on her foot as she enters the elevator. Now, I did enjoy this little moment here as she tries to do it repeatedly and ultimately smashes her phone, shattering the screen. Now, this episode has Trish narrating, where the first one had Jessica. However, Trish's narration seems to be a little bit differently focused. Whereas Jessica, of course, was focusing on the good and bad in her and those around her, Trish is definitely narrating in kind of the context of what it means to be a hero. These done in the multiple drafts of an email that Jessica found in episode 1. Though we do learn that through these narrations that the version that Jessica read was much harsher and angry, whereas most of these were kind of seeking forgiveness and very kind. Despite going through the same procedure to receive the powers, it definitely looks like Trish's aren't as naturally coming as Jessica's were, with her, after attempting all these catches of the phone on her foot, coming to kind of shrug it off as just a dumb luck moment to catch her phone like that. However, this all changes as she enters the dark street outside of Jessica's apartment. We see a little trick of the light as what was dark then fades to a much brighter scene, implying then that since we're looking through Trisha's eyes that she has night vision, as cats do as well, who are able to intake various levels of light, allow them to see much easier at night. It appears that Trish now has this feline power as well. Excited to go tell Jessica, her best friend, she turns to re-enter the apartment. However, remembering their status as friends right now, she kind of half-heartedly looks back down and walks back away. Enter the training montage, and we as an audience learn that basically her catching the phone on her foot was a fluke, as Trish continues to struggle to actually use her powers. Now, of course, I would kind of see a struggle here as she comes to term with them and understands how they work, but more so in a way of balancing them and figuring out, not necessarily struggling to have them at all. We see her doing various agility and balance tests, often falling and failing miserably. And in the comics, Hellcat also has superhuman strength to some degree, and we really don't get any indication of that. Though her trainer at one point does kind of make a crack about her all of a sudden being a lot more focused and a lot more, I guess, powerful at some level, and kind of making a crack about her potentially of starting to use steroids. The only thing that we do see in this training montage that kind of makes sense is the fact that she's training up on her martial arts skills, which does make sense as those don't necessarily come naturally even to someone who is super strong, and she does need to learn how to use those skill sets. But her continuing to fall in over and over again as she does agility and balance tests, one of which is walking across a back of a park bench, which is something I've actually done on multiple occasions. It's not that hard. And so it was just a big letdown, especially considering it was like in a bad kind of early YouTube parkour video style montage of this. I was just really let down by that whole sequence. Continuing on this Trish-focused episode, we see her take down her first bad guy, a cell phone thief. Gotta start somewhere, causing Trish to realize that she does need to hide her identity as she's very recognizable, being a celebrity. Granted, Tony was a celebrity as well before he became Iron Man, but Trish doesn't have the billions of dollars that Tony does to cover up her problems. Now, this is only made a little bit funnier as the fact that Trish kind of mistakes the girl who is here to serve her law papers as a fan trying to get a patsy kind of moment there at the gym. Ultimately, though, she is served, causing her to have to go to the lawyer of the vigilantes, which is Jerry. Jerry, of course, not being given the information that Trish did this as a vigilante effort, but just trying to be a good citizen. And that, of course, then brings us back to Malcolm, who is put on Trish's case to dig up information on the accuser and to figure out if there's anything they could use against him. Again, giving us a moment where Malcolm is debating where he falls on that good and bad scale. Trish, leaving Jerry's office, decides to get that much-needed disguise, heading to the local costume shop. Now here we see a nice little montage of her trying on various outfits that make some really fun references. First one we see is kind of this purple and white, kind of almost reminiscent of Jessica Jones's costume in the comics. This kind of a nice kind of metaphor for how she always wished to have Jessica's powers to do all the heroics that she thought that Jessica should be doing, now having the opportunity to do that self. I'm also pretty sure in there we saw a nice kind of bright red wig, which would be reminiscent of her Patsy days, and the fact that she has red hair in the comic books. We also see her try on a very ill-fitting kind of half mask that is in the shape of a black cat face, this being very similar to the kind of face mask that she wears in the comics, and then the next outfit being directly from the comics, a yellow and black jumpsuit, to which she says, "Hell no." A nice note to the fact that her alias in the comics, of course, is Hellcat. Ultimately, though, she decides to not do any of these, buying them all, though. But as she puts them in her trunk, she finds the actual disguise, a beanie, and then she's already wearing a bluish scarf that she then just puts over her bottom half of her face. Though this actually still works as a nice reference to her costume in the comic books, her wearing all dark blue. There's a similar kind of costume that kind of also looks like that, where she had a face cover and not so much of a cap, but still the beanie providing those little ear kind of nods on her head. And then, of course, having the little peekaboo of yellow in the middle from her undershirt. So it still works and it still references the material, and it was nice to see those little kind of nods to the more traditional costumes. Something I've really enjoyed in the Netflix series, for the heroes that choose not to go with the more traditional flashy costumes, still wearing something that makes kind of nods and getting to see those representations of those costumes in some way throughout the series. The only kind of bad thing with her going with this more street style look and not her traditional more costume is that means that that's bad news for her razor claws. In the comics, the claws are actually a part of the suit being built into the gloves, not something she actually has. Though they could go with this and do this anyway in the comics, giving her more Italian fingernails, as it's something we have seen as a power set in the MCU. Mayhem, aka Bridget from the Cloak and Dagger series, has something that's very similar, where she has razor sharp nails that can cut through some various things. It doesn't really show that she can cut through like heavy duty metal and stuff like that, like Hellcat's claws could in the comics, but still do some serious damage, especially to other people. I also highly doubt we are not going to see a telekinetic Hellcat. Now, for a short time in the comics, when she was interacting with Moondragon, who we potentially are getting in the MCU, Hellcat kind of gained some telekinetic abilities from her and kind of was able to move small objects and stuff like that with her mind. It was never super impressive telekinesis. I don't see us getting that in this adaptation particularly. Ultimately, though, we do see Trish kind of fully come into her abilities and understand them as a whole. Excited to go tell Jessica, she shows up at her apartment again to kind of let her know what's going on. However, not wanting to interrupt Jessica talking to Oscar, she hides around the corner to wait. As she overhears this conversation, we kind of get closure as an audience on the Oscar character, kind of establishing how their relationship ended and the fact that we will not be seeing him moving forward, though potentially we still will be seeing Vito throughout the series, which I like that little kid. I hope we do get a lot of him. In this conversation, though, we see that Jessica is very much so still hurt and upset about everything that happened at the end of the season 2, not ready yet to forgive, giving Trish the clue that she probably shouldn't talk to Jessica just yet, and Trish ultimately leaves the apartment. We now come full circle to the events of episode 1, where Jessica crashes Trish's attempt to take down the man with the statue. We find out that Trish is after this man because he is potentially a suspect in a assault charge, where he potentially has put his sister in the hospital over the statue. Now, Jessica eventually thinks that because she wasn't wearing a mask and the man saw him, that this is what led to the stabbing, asking Malcolm to have Trish come to the hospital and visit her. Trish, of course, thinks this is the moment that the two of them will have their reconciliation and work together moving forward. However, Jessica just wants the name that Trish was after, Andrew Brandt. Jumping back into Malcolm's story of the episode, we do kind of find out what exactly all he did to get the man to settle for such a low rate. Trish pushing him to tell everything, and both of them not necessarily being happy about what happened. Malcolm more so not happy that it came so easy to him to do this kind of horrible thing to the man, and feeling very kind of dirty on the inside about it. Trish, though, immediately being the moral compass that she is quick to tell just how disgusting she thinks it is that Malcolm did this, telling him to never do anything like that for her ever again. Malcolm clapping back real quick to tell her that she should definitely keep the law firm on retainer, as they are really good at helping out those who are guilty, which is something very interesting considering earlier in the episode, Malcolm finally learned out exactly what Trish did at the end of season 2. Now, Trish also throughout this episode has been struggling with this whole scale of what is good and evil, and at one point we see her in a car kind of coming to terms with understanding that it isn't as easy as she thought it was and probably should not have pushed Jessica so hard. We get it, Jessica Jones, There's a theme to this season. It's episode 2. Stop nailing it into the ground. My definite takeaway from this episode is that Trish is the problem here, and I think she's actually going to be the catalyst for a lot of the things that we see happen in this whole season. With her constantly trying to be good and force her morality on others, constantly getting more and more pushback, realizing that it's not this easy and that her actions have serious consequences. Much of what she is doing resulting in the final conflict and perhaps leading us down the road to Selinger, our named villain for the season, who we have not yet met. I don't think. Now, I also do think that this whole stabbing thing and everything that's going on potentially with the bandit and everything that Trish is after will be kind of interconnected somehow as well to all that. And of course, I still am suspectful of Eric, even though we really didn't get any continuation of that story in this episode. I just don't quite trust him, and I feel like he is involved in all that as well to some degree. Now, I will say that I really hope that we continue this kind of perspective narration. I really liked it in these first 2 episodes. I think it's a really cool aspect, and I hope we get a Malcolm and Jerry episode as well, kind of giving us some great perspective on their views of morality, which is obviously the theme of this season, and kind of helps us understand how they fall on that scale and how their actions will ultimately result in the finale of this season. What do all of you think, though? What were your reactions and thoughts about episode 2? Did you like it? Did you not? Leave me those thoughts down in those comments. We, of course, will be chugging on through this season, so make sure to subscribe and set the alerts because you do not want to miss a thing, both for this season of Jessica Jones and all the other content I put on the channel. In the meantime, though, I love you all 3,000, and I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend!